They say hindsight is 20/20, but no one ever tells you how blind love can make you. My name is Jack Morrison. I'm 42 years old, and until 3 months ago, I thought I had it all. A good job, a home that didn't creak too loud, and a wife I'd die for. Turns out I was just dying inside, slowly, while she lived a double life right under my nose. Her name is Laura. Blonde, smart, beautiful. She had the kind of smile that could unmake a man. We met at college in '05, fell fast, got married in '07. Everyone said we were perfect for each other. Hell, I believed it. For nearly 2 decades, I built my life around that belief like a fool stacking bricks on quicksand. It started small. That's how it always does, doesn't it? A late night at work, a new phone password, that ever so slight shift in her voice when she said my name. But I ignored it all, told myself I was just being paranoid. That work was stressful. That love, real love, could weather anything. But love isn't supposed to leave you guessing. One night in April 14th, I remember it too well. I came home earlier than usual. I'd forgotten my laptop at the office, drove back, realized I'd left it in the car all along, and turned around again. Classic me. When I stepped through the door, the house was too quiet. No TV, no footsteps, just silence. Then I heard it. A voice, male, muffled, from upstairs. My first instinct? She was on a call. But something in me knew. Some primal buried instinct we men don't like to admit exists. It clawed its way out of my chest and up my throat. I took the stairs one at a time, slow, quiet. I wasn't ready for what I might see, but I couldn't stop. The bedroom door was ajar. And that's when I heard her laugh, that laugh, the one I used to believe was mine. I didn't open the door. I didn't scream or cry. I just stood there, hand on the knob, heart splitting in half. After a few seconds, I turned around, walked back down, and left. Drove until the gas light blinked on. Sat on the side of the road with my hands gripping the steering wheel like it could hold me together. That was the night everything changed. But it wasn't the beginning. Oh, no. That came later, because what I would soon learn is this. She had been cheating on me for years, many, many years, and I had no idea. It's amazing how good we are at lying to ourselves. You can live with someone for years, share a bed, a bank account, a dog, and still know absolutely nothing about who they truly are. Or maybe deep down, you do know. Maybe you just don't want to look that truth in the eye. After that night in April, I didn't confront her, not yet. I needed proof. More than a voice, more than a laugh, something undeniable. I was done being the fool who doubted his instincts. But the thing that ate me alive wasn't just the idea that she had someone else. It was the slow, horrifying realization that this wasn't new. Once you start looking back through your life with different eyes, everything shifts. I began to see it all in a new, cruel light. The girls' trips that were never posted on Instagram. The way her phone was always upside down on the table like it had something to hide. The sudden interest in new lingerie a few years back. Stuff she never wore around me. I remembered our 10th anniversary. I'd booked a surprise weekend in Asheville, cabin, fireplace, the works. She said she had a work thing she couldn't reschedule. I went alone, drank too much, stared at the fire until my eyes burned. She called that Saturday night, sounding distant, said she missed me. I believed her. But now I know better. There was a guy named Ben. She worked with him. I never liked him. Too slick. Too many inside jokes between them. But when I brought it up, she laughed like I was being ridiculous. Jack, seriously, he's like a brother. a brother who sent her texts at 2 a.m., a brother who accidentally left his cologne in our car once. I remember how Laura started guarding her phone like it was made of glass. If it buzzed, she'd snatch it so fast you'd think it was on fire. And God forbid I asked who it was. "Just work," she'd say, already walking out of the room. Still, I told myself, she loves me. We're just busy. People grow apart. That's normal, right? No, Jack, it's not. Growing apart doesn't smell like another man's cologne. I spent the next few days playing detective. I dug into her emails, her messages, anything I could get my hands on. What I found didn't just hurt, it changed everything. Hotel confirmations, secret accounts, deleted conversations she thought were gone forever, and dates, specific dates, that lined up with birthdays, anniversaries, funerals. She wasn't just cheating. She was doing it while pretending to love me, looking me dead in the eyes and lying without a flinch. That's when the real pain started, not just the betrayal, but the realization of how long I'd been living a lie. It wasn't just one night, it was years, and I needed to know how far it went. I used to believe secrets had a smell, like rust or old paper, something sour you couldn't quite place. But when I finally started pulling at the threads of Laura's life, I found out the truth. Secrets don't smell. They smile at you. They hug you good night. They make coffee in the morning and kiss you like nothing's wrong. After I found the hotel receipts and the strange email threads, I went deeper, much deeper. I didn't sleep. I barely ate. I just sat there, hunched over my laptop like some obsessed freak in a true crime documentary, piecing together a puzzle I didn't even know existed a week ago. She had a second phone. That was the first bomb. It was an old iPhone 8, buried in the back of her closet in a shoebox labeled tax stuff. I don't know what made me check there. Maybe desperation, maybe instinct. Inside the box, beneath some dusty folders and fake receipts, was the phone. Dead, screen cracked. I charged it up like it was evidence from a crime scene, and it was. The lock screen lit up. Ben. The messages weren't just sexual. That would have almost been easier, in some twisted way. No, they were worse. They were intimate, real, full of inside jokes, late-night worries, even talk about me. He still doesn't suspect a thing. Poor Jack. He's too nice for his own good. Maybe one day we won't have to sneak around. He's been asking questions lately. I'll play it cool. Every sentence I read stabbed deeper. She talked about our marriage like it was a prison she was serving time in. Like I was the warden and Ben was her weekend escape. They had nicknames for me. The ghost, the roommate. That one stuck with me. She hadn't seen me as a husband in years, and yet I could still hear her voice from just 2 weeks ago, laughing at dinner when I burned the garlic bread. Still see the way she'd leaned over and wiped the sauce off my cheek. All of it, performance. Every damn moment, I started writing things down, building a timeline. I needed to know how long it had been going on. 1 year? 2? Try 8. 8 years of overlapping lies. 8 years of girls' weekends, conference trips. He's just a friend. 8 years of me carrying the weight of this marriage alone, thinking the silence between us was just life being hard. Turns out the silence was full of someone else's voice. I looked in the mirror that night, not to admire myself, just to see who the hell I had become. I didn't recognize the man staring back. Not yet. But I would. The sickest part of betrayal isn't the act itself. It's the aftermath, The quiet hours where you look around your life and realize nothing means what you thought it did. Every photo, every touch, every shared memory becomes suspect, contaminated. Even the walls feel dishonest. After reading her messages, I walked through our house like a ghost. Everything was too familiar and yet off. The couch we picked out together? I remembered her texting Ben from it while I sat a few feet away watching the game. The kitchen island where we once danced to old rock songs with a bottle of red in hand. That's where she'd answered one of his calls and told me it was her sister. I couldn't look at anything the same way. I couldn't look at her the same way. Laura noticed I'd gone quiet, of course. She asked if I was stressed from work, if I was getting sick. I said I was tired. That was true, tired of everything. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. Why? Because I needed more than revenge. I needed clarity. I needed to understand who she'd become, who I'd become. And I wasn't ready to see what would happen when this all blew up. Once the truth came out, there'd be no going back, no pretending, no fixing, just fire and ash. So I waited. I started watching her the way you'd study an animal in the wild. Not with love, with curiosity, distance, like I didn't know her at all, which, in hindsight, might have been the truth. I noticed the patterns now. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she wore the same perfume she used to save for special occasions, sweet and sharp, something that lingered even after she left. She came home at 7:15 sharp, always with a fresh coffee in hand, claiming she stopped at a local cafe to clear her head. I knew that cafe. It closed at 6. She smiled more on those days, wore lipstick more often. She even started playing music again. Old soul records, stuff we used to slow dance to. It wasn't romance. It was guilt trying to dress up as affection. One night, I followed her. She said she was heading to her friend Rachel's house for a movie and wine night. I waited 15 minutes, then drove after her. No confrontation, just quiet, bitter confirmation. She didn't go to Rachel's. She went to a 2-story condo across town, lights off, curtains drawn. She stood outside the door for a minute before it opened. He kissed her before she even stepped inside. I turned off my headlights and sat there, parked a block away, watching the house like it was some kind of theater. But this wasn't a show. This was my life falling apart in real time. They stayed inside for 2 hours. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at that door, waiting for it to open again, knowing that the woman who'd stepped back out wasn't my wife anymore. She was someone else now, and she had been for a long time. The next morning, she brought me coffee in bed. "Vanilla oat milk, right?" she said with that same easy smile I'd seen 100 times before. I looked up at her and felt something shift inside me. Something subtle, but irreversible. The kind of shift that lets you walk into a room filled with smoke and not even cough. I took the cup, nodded, thanked her, and in that moment, I realized I could lie just as easily as she could. I spent the day working from home, though not much work happened. I couldn't stop thinking about the man behind that door, the man who kissed my wife, the man who lived in a condo with drawn curtains, probably thinking he was the clever one in this equation. I didn't know much about him, but I knew enough to hate him. Ben, who once shook my hand at her office Christmas party like he wasn't fucking my wife behind my back. Ben, who probably laughed at me with her in bed, thinking I was just some clueless, domesticated idiot mowing lawns and paying mortgages while he got the good parts of her. I'd seen him before. Tall, athletic, clean cut. The type of guy who uses aftershave and wears button-downs even on weekends. Confident in that effortless, smug kind of way. I remembered thinking he was one of those guys who peaked in high school but never realized it. Now I wasn't so sure. I started watching him. I know how that sounds, but I didn't care. I followed him after work, kept track of his movements, when he stopped by her place, when he didn't. I watched how casually he moved, like nothing he did had consequences, like he didn't just punch a hole through 17 years of my life. But here's what I noticed, and it surprised me. He was alone, always, never smiled at strangers, always on his phone, always looking over his shoulder, like he knew what he was doing was wrong, but not wrong enough to stop. He didn't seem proud. He didn't even seem happy. He seemed addicted. That was the word, addicted. And Laura? She wasn't in love with him. I could see it now. She was addicted too. Addicted to the secrecy, the rush, the thrill of doing something forbidden and getting away with it. It made me sick. It also made me dangerous. I started keeping notes, names, times, addresses. I took screenshots, photos. I created a folder on a USB drive titled Truth. If I was going to burn my life to the ground, I wanted to have every piece of evidence ready to light the match. But here's the thing about fire. It doesn't just burn the guilty, it burns everything. And I was beginning to realize I wasn't sure if I wanted revenge or if I just wanted it all to end. They say that if you pretend long enough, the act becomes real. That if you smile through the pain, eventually, the pain forgets its name. That's a lie. Every day after that night, I wore the mask, played the role of the loving husband. I kissed her goodbye in the mornings. I asked how her day was. I rubbed her shoulders when she claimed she was exhausted. And through it all, I watched her, studied her. She didn't suspect a thing. But cracks were beginning to show, not just in her mask, but in mine. I'd lie awake next to her, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was dreaming of him, if she missed him when she was with me, if every word she spoke was filtered through a mental edit of what not to say. She'd started talking more, ironically, like guilt was pressing her to reconnect with me. She told me about people at work, about a neighbor's annoying dog, about a friend going through a divorce. I listened. I nodded. And all I could think was, you belong in that story. You're the cause of stories like that. One night, she suggested we go away for a weekend. Just the two of us. Some cabin in Vermont. We need this, she said. I feel like we've been distant lately. I wanted to laugh. Distant? That was one hell of a word for betrayed, shattered, and silently unraveling. But I said yes. Of course I said yes, because I had a new plan forming. Not revenge. Not yet. But I wanted to see what she'd do when the walls started closing in. I wanted to push, just a little, and watch her squirm. So I started planting seeds. You've been distracted lately, I told her over dinner one night. Anything on your mind? She blinked. What do you mean? I don't know, I said casually. You just feel elsewhere sometimes. There was the faintest twitch in her eye, a flicker, barely visible, but I saw it. She covered it with a smile. Just stress, work stuff. You know how it is. I nodded, sipping my wine, watching her fingers tighten slightly around her fork. I knew exactly how it was. The more I played the part, the more she leaned in. Touches on the arm, long looks, the occasional sudden kiss while I was pouring coffee. It wasn't affection. It was fear. Somewhere deep down she could feel it. Something was changing. and she didn't know what, but I did. I was becoming something new, not broken, not yet healed, but aware. And awareness is a dangerous thing, especially when you got nothing left to lose. I used to think truth was sacred, something to be protected, held up like a light in the dark. But now I understand. Truth is a weapon, and once you hold it long enough, your hands start to itch. You want to use it. You want someone to bleed. I had enough evidence to shatter her world. Photos, messages, call logs, GPS pings, a journal's worth of notes stored across a dozen devices. I didn't even know why I kept collecting it. Part of me still hoped I'd wake up and find out I was wrong, that this had all been some terrible misunderstanding. But another part, the darker part, was preparing for war. I kept thinking about our wedding vows, how she'd stood in front of me, eyes glassy with tears, voice shaking, promising forever. I believed every word, and maybe she did too at the time. But what are promises worth when they age like milk? One night, I watched her sleep. That sounds romantic when you say it out loud, doesn't it? But it wasn't. She was curled up on her side, breathing soft and even, her hand resting on my pillow. I stared at her for what felt like hours, wondering what version of me lived in her dreams. Was I the fool, the fallback plan? Did I even exist in her head when she closed her eyes? I whispered something into the dark that night, something I hadn't said aloud since this all began. I hate you. It wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was hollow, empty, not even meant for her. Just a statement I needed to hear myself say. And still, she didn't stir. The next morning, I checked her phone again. I knew the password now. She hadn't changed it. Either she trusted me too much, or she thought I was still too blind to see the signs. There were new messages. From Ben. Last night was perfect. Still smelling you on my skin. He doesn't suspect a thing, right? I wish I could wake up next to you instead. The last one made something inside me rupture, not snap, not break. Rupture, like pressure building behind a dam for years and finally bursting wide open. And then, as if fate had a sick sense of humor, her phone lit up in my hand. She was getting a call. From him. Ben. I stared at the screen for a long moment. My thumb hovered over the green button. I almost answered. I almost told him who I was. Told him I knew everything. Told him his time was up. But I didn't. Instead, I let it ring. I memorized the number. Then I turned off the phone and left it exactly where I found it, because the truth wasn't ready yet. It was still sharpening its edges. And when I finally let it out, I wanted it to cut deep. There's a strange kind of power in knowing something no one else does. It's like sitting in a room full of people and holding a live grenade behind your back, smiling, making small talk, knowing you could end it all with one twitch of the wrist. That's what I felt every time I looked at Laura now. Not heartbreak, not anger, control. For the first time in years, I held the upper hand. She thought she was fooling me, playing me. But the game had changed. She was dancing on a wire, and I was holding the scissors. The weekend trip she suggested was coming up. She booked a cabin, picked the dates, even bought a new sweater. She said I'd like on her. I smiled. I told her I couldn't wait. I kissed her forehead and watched her walk away, completely unaware that I was planning something far different from her fantasy of reconnection. I wasn't sure what I was going to do out there in Vermont. Tell her? Expose it all? Burn the relationship down in the middle of the woods where no one could interrupt? Or maybe just watch her squirm, push her until the lie cracked on its own, see how deep her loyalty to her lover really ran. That week, I tested her more. Subtle things. I mentioned running into her old co-worker, casually brought up Ben's name just to see if she'd flinch. She didn't. She was good. Too good. That's what scared me the most. Not that she was lying, but how effortlessly she was doing it. One night, I said, "You ever think people can love two people at once?" She hesitated just long enough for the answer to show itself. "Maybe," she finally said. "But I think when it happens, someone always ends up getting hurt." I nodded. "Yeah, I think you're right." She smiled, kissed me, went to take a shower, and I stood there staring at the spot she'd just left, heart pounding. She was preparing herself emotionally. That was my read. She knew something was off, even if she didn't know how close I was to the edge. But I wanted her to feel safe. I wanted her to believe that I was still the man she once married, the man she could manipulate, control, lie to without consequence. Because when the truth finally came out, I wanted it to knock the air out of her lungs, not with rage, not with drama, with precision. The truth was ready now, sharpened, waiting, and I was done being a ghost in my own life. We left on a Friday morning, cool wind, blue sky, 2 travel mugs filled with coffee, and a playlist she made just for the ride. She called it Us Again. Cute, poetic, delusional. Laura wore a gray sweater that hugged her in all the right ways, hair tied back casually like she wasn't trying, but she was. She was trying hard. The whole drive, she kept glancing at me, trying to read my face, trying to bridge the invisible chasm she didn't realize she had dug. If she sensed that something was wrong, she hid it well. Then again, so did I. We passed old gas stations and long stretches of trees, her hand occasionally brushing mine. I forced a smile each time. My stomach felt like it was made of static. My mind was full of fire. But my face? Stone? It was a 5-hour drive, and not once did she mention Ben. Of course she didn't. He didn't exist here. Not in this car, not on this weekend. Here, she was Laura the wife again, laughing at my bad jokes, singing along to Fleetwood Mac, telling stories about college days we both remembered differently. When we got to the cabin, it was exactly what she promised. Quiet, cozy, beautiful. 2 bedrooms, though she pretended not to notice. She unpacked fast, made wine appear out of nowhere, lit a fire like she was trying to resurrect the past with candles and Pinot Noir. I played along. Every second. We cooked together that night. Chicken, garlic, rosemary, the works. She laughed when I dropped a fork. I laughed too, but only one of us was pretending. When we sat down to eat, she raised her glass. "To us," she said. I held my glass midair, watching her eyes. "To honesty," I said. She blinked, smiled, clinked, sipped. After dinner, she tried to initiate something physical. She leaned in, traced her fingers along my collarbone, whispered my name. I froze for a second, too long. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice soft. "Yeah," I said, pulling away gently. "Just tired. Long drive." She nodded, a little too quickly. That was the first real crack. Her eyes dropped for half a second before the smile returned. And I knew. She felt the walls tightening, even if she didn't know why. Later that night, while she slept in the other room, I stepped outside into the cold. I stood beneath the stars, a whiskey in hand, heart pounding. I could hear the fire crackling behind me. I could feel the weight of all 9 chapters of this story pressing down on my ribs. I had everything I needed, the truth, the timing, the stage. Tomorrow, I would end the lie, and I had no idea what would be left standing when I did. I woke up to the smell of bacon and fresh coffee. For a split second, I forgot everything. I was just a man in a cabin, waking up late on a quiet Saturday with the woman he loved. Then it all came rushing back. Laura was in the kitchen, humming softly to herself, barefoot, moving like she belonged here, like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't been living a double life, like I wasn't seconds away from setting a match to everything we'd ever built. "Morning, sleepyhead," she said as I stepped into the room. "Morning," I replied. My voice sounded like it came from someone else's throat. She smiled, handed me a mug, and kissed my cheek. It felt like static electricity against my skin. Nothing warm, just a spark, and gone. I watched her move around the kitchen. She'd always been good at pretending, but now I could see through it. Every move was practiced, measured. She was trying. Hard. Probably more than she ever had in years. Trying to save something she didn't even know was already dead. "Sit," she said. "Let me spoil you today." I sat. We ate in silence for a while, not uncomfortable, not tense, just too quiet. Like the air was holding its breath, waiting for something to snap. I let her talk. Let her fill the space with stories about a book she read, a coworker who got promoted, a funny video her cousin sent her. I nodded when I had to, smiled when appropriate, but my eyes never stopped watching. She didn't bring up work. She didn't bring up Ben. She didn't bring up love. It was all fluff, noise. Halfway through breakfast, I placed my fork down slowly. She noticed. Her eyes flicked to me just for a second too long. "What's on your mind?" she asked. "Nothing," I said, and took a sip of coffee. "Just thinking." "About what?" I looked at her for a long moment. No expression, no clue where this was going. "About how much a person can hide," I said softly. She didn't flinch. That impressed me. "What do you mean?" "Just something I read last night. A guy who lived with his wife for 15 years and didn't know she had a second family in another city, whole other life. Amazing, right? How blind we can be." She gave a small, polite laugh. "People are insane." I stared at her. "Yes," I said, "they are." There was a long pause after that. Her fingers toyed with the edge of her napkin. Her eyes flicked to the window, then back to me. Then she smiled again. Tight, fake, tired. "You okay?" she asked. "I will be," I said. I stood, picked up my plate, and walked to the sink. The truth was pressing against my ribs like a blade, but not yet. Not here, not over coffee and eggs. I wanted her to feel it when it came, to know it was real. And I could already see it in her posture, the first hint of fear, like she sensed the tide changing. She didn't know what was coming, but it was close, very close. The cabin was silent except for the low hum of the fireplace and the occasional creak of settling wood. We were trapped in a strange bubble. Two people who once shared everything, now orbiting around a crater of lies. I realized that confrontation wasn't the only way to break her. Sometimes the slow unraveling is more brutal. The quiet stalking of doubt, the tiny cuts of suspicion until the skin gives way. So I played a new game. I became the shadow she couldn't escape. I asked innocent questions loaded with hidden meaning, like, "Did Rachel call you last night?" when I knew she hadn't. Or, "Did your phone die, or were you just out of reach?" when her silence was suspicious. Her eyes would flicker, Her lips would tighten. Sometimes she'd laugh nervously and change the subject. Other times she'd offer answers too fast, too polished, as if reciting lines from a script she'd rehearsed 1,000 times. But the cracks were there. One evening after dinner, I pretended to be tired and excused myself early. But instead of going to bed, I sat in the living room watching her. She didn't know I was awake. She picked up her phone, typed a message, then deleted it. Did it mean anything? I wasn't sure, but the gesture was a sign, a small confession in a world built on secrets. I wanted to say something, to call her out, but the words caught in my throat. I was learning patience, learning that power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Over the next few days, I observed her patterns more closely. The way she checked her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. The way she flinched when my hand accidentally brushed hers. The way she avoided eye contact just a little longer than before. I could feel her walls closing in, and I was the slow, silent earthquake shaking her foundation. Laura was breaking, not yet shattered, but the first pieces were starting to fall, and soon there'd be no way to put them back. The night was colder than I expected. The fire had died down to a dull glow, and the silence between us had grown thick, almost suffocating. Laura was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone with a kind of nervous energy. I could tell something was eating at her, something she was desperate to keep hidden. I didn't say a word. Instead, I let the room do the talking. Finally, she put the phone down, exhaled sharply, and looked at me. "You're not the same," she said quietly. "No," I agreed. "I'm not." Her eyes searched mine for something. Pity, anger, maybe even forgiveness. She didn't find any of it. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. I shrugged, careful not to give too much away. "Because I have to know. Because I can't live in the dark anymore." She looked away, biting her lip. "Is it true?" Her voice cracked just a little. "Are you going to confront me?" I met her gaze again. "Soon." Her composure faltered for the first time. She closed her eyes and shook her head, a small tear slipping down her cheek. "I didn't want it to be like this," she whispered. "Neither did I. But this was the price of secrets." We sat there, silence wrapping us like a thick fog. For the first time, I saw the weight of what she carried, the guilt, the fear, the exhaustion of living a lie. And I knew one thing for certain. Once the truth was out, there'd be no turning back. The morning light seeped through the curtains, casting pale stripes across the room. I was awake before her, staring at the ceiling, every nerve taut like a wire ready to snap. I could hear her moving around, quiet and careful, as if she was trying not to wake the ghosts between us. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for, or dreading, for so long. She emerged from the bedroom, eyes red-rimmed, hair a mess from restless sleep. She looked vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen since the early days. But that vulnerability was a weapon now, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to break it or be broken by it. I stood, walked over, and faced her without a word. She swallowed hard, then said, "We can't keep pretending." "No," I agreed, my voice steady but low. "We can't." The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Then she spoke again, voice barely above a whisper. "You know, don't you?" I nodded. She closed her eyes, took a shaky breath. "I never meant to hurt you, but you did." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I'm sorry." Sorry. The word hung in the air, fragile and inadequate. "I don't want to lose you," she said, "but I'm lost too." I wanted to reach out, to hold her, to scream, to rage, to forgive, but all I did was step back. "Maybe," I said quietly, "we're both lost." And just like that, everything between us shattered. The years of lies, silence, love, and betrayal crashed down in a flood I couldn't stop. We were no longer two people trying to hold on. We were two strangers facing the ruins. After the storm broke, the cabin felt emptier than before. The walls that once held our laughter now echoed with silence and the weight of unspoken words. Laura sat on the edge of the bed, staring out the window as if searching for a way back, or maybe a way out. I paced the room, hands clenched into fists, wrestling with a hurricane of emotions. Anger, hurt, confusion, love. Could I forgive her? Could I forgive myself for staying so long in a marriage that had become a battlefield? She looked at me then, eyes pleading. What do we do now? I didn't have an answer, because the truth was I was broken too. Broken, but not defeated. I wanted to tear it all down, to erase the pain by destroying the past. But a small voice inside whispered something else. Maybe survival wasn't about destruction. Maybe it was about finding a way to live with the cracks, to rebuild from the ashes. I sat beside her. "We have to decide," I said softly. "Do we walk away, or do we try to fix this?" She nodded slowly, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I want to try," she whispered. And in that moment, I realized the hardest battles are fought not with fists, but with hearts. The morning after our talk felt like the first day of a new war, one fought with words instead of weapons, and every sentence was a minefield. We tried to act normal, but normal felt alien. Laura was quieter than usual, and I found myself watching her, trying to read the language of her silence. We sat across from each other at the breakfast table, a chasm of things unsaid stretching between us. I reached out, hesitated, then touched her hand. She flinched. I pulled back, the sting sharper than I expected. "I'm sorry," I said. "For what?" "For all of this, for not knowing sooner, for letting it get this far." She looked down, voice barely audible. "I'm sorry, too." The apologies felt empty, but they were all we had. Days passed in a blur of cautious conversations and awkward silences. Sometimes I caught her staring at me, as if searching for the man she once loved beneath the weight of betrayal, and sometimes I caught myself wondering if I could ever find him again. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, there was a flicker of something else. Hope, fragile, tentative, but real. Trust, I learned, is like glass. Once shattered, it never quite fits back the same way. Laura and I spent days trying to piece together what was left of ours. We talked, really talked, for the first time in years. No evasions, no lies, hiding behind smiles. She told me about the emptiness she'd felt, the loneliness creeping into our marriage while I was buried in work, the moments when she'd reached for something real and found only silence. I listened, trying to understand, even when the words cut like knives. I told her about my own failures, how I'd closed myself off, how I'd ignored the signs because I wanted to believe. Our conversations were messy, painful. We both stumbled over emotions too heavy to carry alone, but slowly the cracks began to fill. Small gestures, a hand on a shoulder, a shared cup of coffee, a smile that wasn't forced. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something. The first fragile steps toward healing. Yet every night, when the lights went out and silence returned, The past whispered loudly, and I knew this road would be long, longer than either of us wanted to admit. Just when I thought we might find solid ground, the past started creeping back like a shadow at dusk. One evening, I noticed her phone buzz with a message she quickly hid. Her eyes darted to mine for a brief second, too quick to be innocent. When I asked, she said, "It's nothing." But I knew better. That simple word carried the weight of 1,000 lies. I wasn't ready to accuse her again. Not yet. Instead, I kept watching, feeling the old tension coil inside me. Trust had been wounded, and every secret, no matter how small, reopened that wound. I wanted to believe she was trying. I needed to believe it. But the ghosts of her betrayal weren't done with us, and the shadows were lengthening. Days passed with a tension that neither of us dared to break. The silence between us grew heavier, like an invisible wall rising higher with every unspoken word. Laura's quietness wasn't peace. It was retreat. One night, I asked her directly, "Are you hiding something?" Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I thought she might finally confess. But she only shook her head. "I want to be honest," she said, voice trembling. "I'm just scared. Scared of losing me, scared of facing what she'd done, scared of the truth." I sat down beside her, feeling the ache of our shared brokenness. "Whatever it is," I said, "we'll face it together, but you have to trust me." She nodded, but I could see the walls still stood tall. Trust was fragile, and every silence weighed heavy. The past wasn't just behind us, it was sitting beside us, threatening to pull us under. The night air was thick with tension as I sat across from Laura, the quiet between us louder than any words. I couldn't hold it in any more. "Tell me," I demanded, voice low but firm, "is there something you're not telling me?" Her hands trembled as she looked down at the table. After a long pause, she finally spoke. "There is." My heart sank like a stone. "I met someone," she said, voice barely above a whisper. I closed my eyes, the weight of those words crashing down on me. "But it's over," she added quickly. "I ended it before you knew." I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. But the doubt was already gnawing at my soul. "How long?" I asked. "Not long," she said. "A few months." The room spun and I felt like I was drowning. Everything I'd built, every memory, every lie, every truth, they all shattered in that moment, and I realized the unraveling had only just begun. The weight of her confession hung between us, thick and suffocating. I wanted to scream, to cry, to rage, but all I felt was numbness. "How could you?" was the only thing I managed to say. She looked at me, tears spilling freely now. I was lonely. I felt invisible. I made a mistake. A mistake. Those words sounded hollow, meaningless against the years of betrayal. I ran my hands through my hair, trying to steady the storm inside me. "I don't know if I can forgive this," I whispered. "I don't expect you to," she said, "but I want to try." "If you do." The room was heavy with silence. I knew this moment would define everything that came next. Do I walk away, free myself from this pain, or do I fight? For us, for the life we once dreamed of. I looked at her, really looked, and saw the brokenness mirrored in her eyes. Maybe love wasn't enough, but maybe it was the only thing left. "I need time," I said finally. She nodded, understanding but still hopeful, and just like that, the future became a question mark. Days blurred into nights as I wrestled with the storm inside me. The cabin, once a refuge, now felt like a cage. Laura gave me space, but the distance between us grew thicker with each passing hour. I found myself walking the edges of our life together, questioning every memory, every moment. Was it love or just habit? Was forgiveness possible, or was I fooling myself? I stared at her sometimes, searching for signs, small gestures, fleeting glances that might tell me she was still the woman I married. But the more I looked, the more the shadows deepened. One night, I caught her silently crying in the kitchen. For a moment, our eyes met, and the weight of everything hung heavy in the air. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered. "I don't know if I can stay," I replied. Between hope and doubt, we were both adrift, two souls tethered by pain, unsure of the path forward. The days grew shorter, and the silence between us stretched like a fragile thread, ready to snap. We barely spoke, but when we did, it was careful, like walking on thin ice. I could see the weariness in Laura's eyes, the exhaustion of living with the truth and the lies intertwined. One evening, she sat beside me on the porch, the setting sun casting long shadows over us. "We can't keep living like this," she said softly. "No, we can't," I agreed. The weight of the past pressed down on us, but beneath it, a flicker of something else, a possibility, a chance to rebuild or the courage to walk away. I looked at her, the woman who had broken my heart and held it all at once. "Whatever happens," I said, "we face it together." She nodded, tears glistening. For the first time in a long time, I believed in the possibility of a new beginning. The tension was unbearable, thick enough to suffocate us both. We sat across from each other, the air charged with words unspoken and truths too painful to face. I looked at Laura, her eyes red from sleepless nights, her hands trembling slightly. We were two people worn thin by years of secrets and betrayals. "Can we really start over?" I asked, voice breaking. She nodded slowly. "I want to try, but I know it won't be easy." "No," I admitted, "it won't, but maybe it's worth the fight." We made no promises that night, no grand declarations, just a fragile agreement to take the next step, however uncertain. The road ahead was long, jagged, and unknown, but for the first time in years, we weren't facing it alone. Whatever came next, this was our last stand. The morning sun spilled through the cracked blinds, casting sharp lines across the room where everything had changed. Laura sat across from me, eyes clear but heavy, the weight of all we'd been through settling between us like a storm ready to break. We weren't the same people who had walked into this marriage years ago, those naive souls blinded by love and trust. No, we were scarred, worn, but somehow still standing. I looked at her and saw both the woman I loved and the stranger who'd shattered my world. "Do you regret it?" I asked softly. She hesitated, then shook her head. "No, I regret the lies, but not us." I swallowed hard. Me too. We both knew that forgiveness wasn't a destination, but a journey, one that would demand more strength than either of us had shown so far. But for the first time, there was hope, a fragile, uncertain hope. Maybe this was how love survived, not by ignoring the cracks, but by learning to live with them. I reached out, took her hand. "We'll keep fighting," I promised. She squeezed it back. And in that moment, despite the scars, despite the past, we chose to believe in a future together.